Captain Sarah Chen's hands trembled as she reviewed the intelligence report for the third time. The data streams from the reconnaissance drones painted a picture so horrifying that her mind refused to accept it at first glance. Across the bridge of the UES Retribution, her crew maintained their posts with the disciplined silence of seasoned warriors, but she could feel the tension radiating from each station. "Confirm the scan results again," Sarah ordered, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. "I need to be absolutely certain before we proceed." Lieutenant Commander Torres, her tactical officer, ran through the verification protocols once more. His dark eyes reflected the same disbelief that Sarah felt. "Ma'am, the biosignatures are unmistakable. We're detecting approximately 200 human children, ages ranging from 6 to 16, confined within the Zephyrian detention facility on Kepler 442b. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command settle heavier on her shoulders. 3 months ago, the Zephyrian Collective had approached the United Earth Alliance with promises of peaceful trade negotiations. Their crystalline ships had arrived at the edge of human space, broadcasting messages of friendship and mutual prosperity. The tall, ethereal beings with their translucent skin and multiple limbs had seemed genuinely interested in establishing diplomatic relations. Sarah had been skeptical from the beginning. In her 25 years of naval service, she had learned that first impressions in space were often deliberately crafted deceptions. The Zephyrians had been too eager, too accommodating, and their technology was clearly superior to humanity's current capabilities. When species with advanced technology sought out less developed civilizations, it rarely ended well for the weaker party. "How long have they been there?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Torres consulted his screens again. "Based on the facility's construction timeline and the children's apparent integration into the structure, we estimate at least 8 months, possibly longer." Sarah's jaw tightened. 8 months meant these children had been taken before the Zephyrians had even made official contact with Earth. While they had been smiling and offering trade agreements, they had already been harvesting human young like some twisted collection project. "What's the status of the diplomatic mission?" she asked her communications officer. "Ambassador Wilson and his team are still on the primary Zephyrian world, ma'am. They've been in negotiations for 2 weeks now. Last communication indicated the Zephyrians were being very cooperative about technology transfers." Of course they were cooperative. They already had what they wanted. Sarah stood and walked to the main view screen, where the blue-green surface of Kepler 442b filled the display. It looked peaceful from orbit, its swirling clouds and vast oceans reminiscent of Earth. But somewhere on that world's surface, human children were being held against their will by creatures who had masqueraded as friends. "Ma'am," Torres spoke up hesitantly, "there's something else. The facility appears to be more than just a detention center. We're detecting extensive research equipment, biological laboratories, and what looks like psychological conditioning chambers." Sarah's blood ran cold. Psychological conditioning chambers meant they weren't just holding the children, they were experimenting on them, trying to break their minds and rebuild them into something else. "Origin of the children?" she asked, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Mixed sources. We've identified children from the outer colonies, New Shanghai, Kepler Station, the mining settlements on Proxima Centauri b. All locations that reported mysterious disappearances over the past year." The puzzle pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The Zephyrians hadn't just stumbled upon human children. They had been systematically hunting them, selecting targets from isolated settlements where disappearances might go unnoticed or unreported for months. They had studied humanity's expansion patterns and exploited the vulnerabilities of frontier life. "Have we been able to establish any communication with the children?" Sarah asked her intelligence officer. "Negative, ma'am. The facility is shielded against most forms of electromagnetic communication. However, we have detected some biorhythmic patterns that suggest the children are being kept in a state of induced lethargy, possibly through chemical means." Sarah felt her military training warring with her maternal instincts. She had 2 children of her own back on Earth, Marcus, age 14, and little Emma, only 8. The thought of them being trapped in alien laboratories, subjected to experiments and conditioning, made her want to order an immediate assault on the facility. But she was a naval officer first, and she understood the broader implications. If the Zephyrians had children from multiple human colonies, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern of behavior that suggested something far more sinister than simple kidnapping. Analysis of the facility's defenses, she requested. Torres brought up a tactical display. Standard Zephyrian energy shields, approximately 30% stronger than our estimates based on their ship configurations. The facility is built into a mountainside with natural defensive advantages. Estimated garrison of 200 Zephyrian personnel, plus automated defense systems we haven't fully analyzed yet. Ground assault feasibility? High casualty projection for a frontal assault, ma'am. The terrain favors defenders, and their energy weapons have demonstrated superiority to our standard infantry equipment. However, their defensive posture suggests they're not expecting military action. No orbital defense platforms, minimal patrol patterns. Sarah nodded grimly. The Zephyrians felt secure because they believed humanity was still fooled by their diplomatic charade. They thought their secret was safe, hidden on a world light years from any major human shipping route. Ma'am, her executive officer, Commander Rodriguez, approached quietly. We need to consider the political ramifications. If we take military action against a species we're actively negotiating with, it could destabilize the entire sector. Sarah turned to face him, and Rodriguez took a half step back from the intensity in her eyes. Commander, there are 200 human children being experimented on by aliens who lied to our faces about their intentions. I don't care if it destabilizes the galaxy. Yes, ma'am, but we should at least inform Earth Command before. Inform them of what? That we've discovered clear evidence of war crimes against human civilians? That a species we trusted has been hunting our children while pretending to want peace? Sarah's voice carried across the bridge, and she could see her crew's faces hardening with resolve. She was right, and everyone knew it. This went beyond politics or diplomacy. This was about protecting the most vulnerable members of humanity from predators who wore friendly masks. How long until we can establish a communication link with Earth? Sarah asked. At this distance, approximately 18 hours for a message to reach Earth Command and another 18 for a response, the communications officer replied. 36 hours. 36 hours while human children suffered in alien laboratories, while creatures that had smiled and offered friendship continued their experiments on young minds that should have been safe in their beds. Sarah made her decision. I'm calling a senior staff meeting in 10 minutes. All department heads, intelligence analysis team, and Marine commanders. We're going to plan a rescue operation. Ma'am, Rodriguez said carefully, without authorization from Earth Command Commander, I have standing orders to protect human lives and respond to acts of aggression against United Earth Alliance citizens. Those children are UEA citizens, and what's being done to them constitutes an act of war, regardless of what the diplomatic corps might think. Sarah walked back to her command chair and activated the ship's internal communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 1 hour, I will be addressing the entire crew regarding our current mission parameters. Until that time, all personnel are to maintain current duty stations and await further orders. She closed the channel and looked around the bridge at her officers. These were good people, experienced professionals who had served with distinction across multiple campaigns. They trusted her judgment, and she was about to ask them to follow her into a situation that could end all of their careers. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Torres said quietly, the crew needs to know what we're dealing with. When word gets out about those children, there's going to be a lot of anger. Sarah nodded. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Controlled anger, directed at the right targets, can be the most powerful force in the universe. The Zephyrians made a fundamental error in their calculations. What's that, ma'am? They assumed that because they're technologically superior, they hold all the advantages. But they've never fought humans who are protecting their young. They have no idea what they've awakened. The mess hall of the UES Retribution had never been completely silent before. 800 crew members sat in perfect stillness as Captain Chen finished explaining what they had discovered on the planet below. The only sounds were the gentle vibrations of the ship's engines and the occasional creak of metal adjusting to thermal changes. Marine Sergeant Kelly Morrison felt her hands curl into fists as the captain's words sank in. 200 children. Kids the same age as her nephew back on Mars. Kids who should have been playing sports, attending school, arguing with their parents about chores. Instead, they were trapped in alien laboratories while creatures with too many arms poked and prodded and tried to rewire their brains. The decision to proceed with the rescue operation is mine alone, Captain Chen continued, her voice carrying clearly through the ship's communication system. I won't order anyone to participate in an action that Earth Command hasn't authorized. Anyone who feels they cannot support this mission may transfer to non-essential duties without prejudice. Kelly looked around the mess hall. No one was moving. Not a single person among 800 trained military personnel was backing down from this fight. Captain Chen seemed to notice this as well. Very well. All department heads report to Conference Room Alpha in 30 minutes. Dismissed. The silence broke as 800 voices erupted at once, but Kelly wasn't listening to the conversations around her. She was thinking about tactics, about the best ways to breach an alien facility without getting those kids killed in the crossfire. Sergeant Morrison, a familiar voice called. She turned to see Lieutenant Colonel Jackson, the Marine Unit Commander, approaching through the crowd. I need to see you and your fire team leaders in briefing room 3. 20 minutes later, Kelly found herself staring at holographic projections of the Zephyrian facility while Colonel Jackson outlined what intelligence had gathered. The structure was built into the side of a mountain, with multiple levels extending deep into the rock. The children appeared to be held in the lower sections, while the research facilities occupied the middle levels. Initial assessment, Sergeant? Jackson asked. Kelly studied the layout carefully. It's designed to be impregnable, sir. Single main entrance, narrow corridors that channel attackers into kill zones, redundant defensive positions. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Agreed. But they built it to keep people out, not necessarily to keep people in. What do you see? Kelly examined the schematics from a different angle. The ventilation systems, sir. They're designed for the Zephyrians' atmospheric requirements, which means they're larger than human standard. And the power distribution suggests they're running life support for a much larger facility than what we're seeing. Meaning? There are sections we haven't mapped yet. Possibly including emergency exits or service tunnels that bypass the main defensive positions. Jackson nodded approvingly. Intelligence believes the same thing. We're going to deploy reconnaissance drones for detailed mapping while the fleet moves into position. Fleet, sir? Captain Chen has been busy. The UES Intrepid and UES Defiance are 3 hours out, responding to our emergency beacon. The Zephyrians think they're dealing with a single exploration vessel that stumbled onto their secret. They have no idea they're about to face a full battle group. Kelly felt a grim smile cross her face. The Intrepid was a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to level a small moon, and the Defiance carried 2 full Marine battalions. The odds were starting to look more favorable. What about the children, sir? How do we extract 200 kids from a hostile facility without getting them killed? Jackson's expression grew serious. That's the critical question, Sergeant. Intelligence analysis suggests the Zephyrians have been using chemical sedation to keep the children docile. If we can neutralize the sedation systems, the kids might be able to help with their own rescue. That's a big if, sir. And even if they can help, they're still children who've been traumatized for months. They might not trust anyone, even humans trying to rescue them. Which is why we're going to need specialists. Dr. Sarah Kim from the Retribution's medical team has experience with trauma response, and she's volunteering to accompany the assault team. Kelly raised an eyebrow. Sir, with respect, sending a doctor into an active combat zone is exactly what we need to do. Those children are going to be terrified, possibly in withdrawal from whatever drugs they've been given, and completely disoriented. Dr. Kim might be the difference between a successful evacuation and a disaster. The briefing continued for another hour, covering everything from communication protocols to ammunition requirements. As Kelly listened, she felt her initial anger transforming into something colder and more focused. The Zephyrians had made a mistake that would cost them dearly. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Chen was dealing with a different kind of challenge. The ship's long-range communications array had detected an incoming transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld, specifically from Ambassador Wilson's diplomatic mission. Captain, we're receiving a priority communication from Ambassador Wilson, the communications officer reported. He's requesting immediate conference with Senior Fleet Command. Chen frowned. The timing was suspicious. Put him through to my ready room. Secure channel. 5 minutes later, she was looking at Ambassador Wilson's tired face on her personal communication screen. Behind him, she could see the crystal spires of the Zephyrian capital city gleaming in alien sunlight. "Captain Chen, thank goodness," Wilson began. "I've been trying to reach Earth Command for hours, but there seems to be some kind of communication interference. I need to update you on the negotiations." "What's the situation, Ambassador?" "It's extraordinary, Captain. The Zephyrians have agreed to share their medical technology with humanity. Their bioregeneration techniques could revolutionize our approach to trauma surgery and genetic diseases. We're talking about saving millions of lives." Chen felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "That's very generous of them, Ambassador. Have they mentioned anything about cultural exchange programs?" Wilson's face brightened. "Actually, yes. They're particularly interested in human educational methodologies. They want to establish exchange programs where young humans could learn their scientific techniques while Zephyrian youth study our social structures." The knot in Chen's stomach grew tighter. The Zephyrians weren't just hiding their crimes, they were actively trying to legitimize them. Their exchange programs would provide legal cover for taking more human children. "Ambassador, I need to share some intelligence with you, but not over this channel. Are you able to return to your shuttle for a secure communication?" Wilson looked puzzled. "Is there a problem, Captain?" The Zephyrians have been nothing but accommodating. Their cultural liaison, Coordinator Veltar, has been particularly helpful in facilitating our discussions. "I'm sure they have been. Please, Ambassador, just return to your shuttle. This is urgent." After Wilson signed off, Chen sat in her ready room for several minutes, staring at the star chart on her wall. The Zephyrians were playing a deep game, one that extended far beyond simple kidnapping. They were positioning themselves to gain legal access to human children while simultaneously offering technological bribes to ensure human cooperation. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from the ship's intelligence section. Chen opened the file and felt her blood freeze. Intelligence had been analyzing the behavioral patterns of the Zephyrian personnel at the facility, and the results painted an even darker picture than she had imagined. The Zephyrians weren't just experimenting on human children, they were trying to create hybrid consciousnesses. The psychological conditioning chambers were designed to strip away human cultural identity and replace it with Zephyrian thought patterns. They were trying to turn human children into living tools, beings with human creativity and adaptability but Zephyrian loyalty and values. Chen stood abruptly and activated her personal communication system. "Colonel Jackson, report to my ready room immediately. And bring Sergeant Morrison." When the two Marines arrived, Chen shared the intelligence findings without preamble. Jackson's face remained professionally neutral, but she could see the fury burning in his eyes. Morrison wasn't even trying to hide her anger. "How long do we have before they complete the conditioning process?" Morrison asked. "Unknown, but intelligence believes we're looking at permanent psychological damage within weeks, possibly days for the children who've been there longest." Jackson leaned forward. "Captain, we need to move fast. Every hour we delay is another hour those kids are being tortured." "Agreed. But we also need to be smart about this. If we botch the rescue, we could trigger retaliation against human colonies across the frontier." "What about the diplomatic mission?" Morrison asked. Chen considered her options. "Ambassador Wilson doesn't know about the facility yet, which means the Zephyrians still think their secret is safe. That gives us an advantage, but it also means we're on our own out here." "Good," Morrison said firmly. "I'd rather handle this without politicians getting in the way." Chen nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. Politicians would want to negotiate, to find diplomatic solutions that preserved trade relationships and avoided interstellar incidents. But there was no negotiating with creatures who tortured children. "Colonel, I want assault plans ready in 6 hours. We move as soon as the other ships arrive." "Yes, ma'am." "What about rules of engagement?" Chen met his eyes steadily. "Any Zephyrian who interferes with the rescue of those children is considered an enemy combatant. We're going in hard and fast, and we're bringing every child home." As the two Marines left her ready room, Chen turned back to the star chart on her wall. Somewhere among those distant points of light was Earth, where human families were sleeping peacefully, trusting that their government would protect their children from monsters hiding in the dark. They were about to find out just how far humanity would go to keep that trust. The UES Retribution shuddered as its railguns fired their opening salvo. From her position in the assault shuttle bay, Sergeant Kelly Morrison felt the deck vibrate beneath her boots and knew the battle had begun. Around her, 40 Marines checked their weapons one final time while the ship's guns pounded the Zephyrian facility's shields. 2 minutes to drop, the shuttle pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Shields are holding at 60%, but the captain's giving them everything she's got. Morrison activated her helmet's tactical display and watched the facility's defensive systems light up like a deadly fireworks show. Energy beams lanced out from hidden emplacements, trying to target the incoming assault shuttles, but the UES Intrepid was drawing most of the fire with its aggressive attack run. "Listen up!" Colonel Jackson's voice cut through the shuttle's engine noise. "Intelligence has confirmed the children are being held in Sublevel 3. Dr. Kim's team will establish a medical triage point in the main corridor while assault teams clear each section. Remember, we're not here to fight a war. We're here to bring our kids home." Morrison checked her weapons charge indicator one more time. The new plasma rifles were still unfamiliar in her hands, but they packed enough punch to burn through Zephyrian battle armor. More importantly, they had non-lethal settings for dealing with terrified children who might not recognize their rescuers. The shuttle lurched as it entered the planet's atmosphere, and Morrison could hear the screaming of air across the hull. Through the small porthole next to her seat, she caught a glimpse of the Zephyrian facility carved into the mountainside. It looked like a metallic cancer growing out of the living rock. 30 seconds. Lock and load. Morrison's team leader, Corporal Davies, gave her a tight nod. They had trained together for 3 years, fought pirates in the Outer Rim, and dealt with hostile alien encounters on survey missions. But nothing had prepared them for this. The shuttle hit the ground hard, its landing struts grinding against broken stone. Morrison was first out the door, her rifle sweeping for targets as her boots touched alien soil. The air tasted wrong, too much nitrogen, not enough oxygen, but her suit's recycling system compensated automatically. "Bravo team, move to the secondary entrance," Jackson's voice commanded through the tactical network. "Alpha and Charlie teams, you're with me on the main assault." Morrison's team sprinted across the rocky terrain toward a ventilation shaft that intelligence had identified as a possible entry point. Behind them, the sounds of battle echoed off the mountain walls as human Marines clashed with Zephyrian defenders. The ventilation shaft was exactly where the reconnaissance drones had predicted, but it was also defended. 2 Zephyrian soldiers in crystalline armor were positioned behind energy barriers, their strange weapons tracking the approaching humans. "Contact front!" Davies shouted, dropping behind a boulder as purple energy beams sizzled past his head. Morrison flanked left, using the rough terrain for cover. The Zephyrians were good fighters, but they were defending a fixed position against attackers who had nothing to lose. She rolled behind an outcropping, aimed carefully, and put 2 plasma bolts through the first alien's chest plate. The creature went down with a sound like breaking glass, its weapon spinning away across the rocks. The second Zephyrian tried to retreat deeper into the facility, but Davies was already moving. His plasma rifle spoke twice, and the corridor fell silent. "Ventilation shaft secured," Morrison reported. "Beginning infiltration." The shaft was a tight fit, but Morrison's team had practiced this approach during the flight to the planet. They moved in single file through the metal ductwork, following the building's blueprints that intelligence had pieced together from drone surveillance. After 10 minutes of crawling through increasingly narrow passages, Morrison heard the sound she had been dreading: human voices. Children's voices, speaking in frightened whispers. She held up a fist, stopping the team's advance. Through the ventilation grate below her, she could see into one of the detention cells. 6 children, ages 8 to 14 by her estimate, huddled together on alien sleeping platforms. Their faces were pale and their eyes held the hollow look of young people who had seen too much. But they were alive. They were alert. And, most importantly, they were still recognizably human despite whatever the Zephyrians had done to them. Morrison carefully removed the ventilation grate and dropped into the cell. The children scrambled backward, terror replacing confusion in their eyes. She immediately lowered her weapon and activated her helmet's external speakers. "It's okay," she said gently, removing her helmet so they could see her face. "I'm Sergeant Morrison, United Earth Alliance Marines. We're here to take you home." A girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old stared at her with wide eyes. "Are you real? They showed us fake humans before. They said nobody was coming for us." Morrison felt her heart break a little. I'm real, sweetheart. My name is Kelly, and I have a nephew about your age back home. What's your name? Emma. Emma Chen. My daddy is a captain in the Space Navy. Morrison's breath caught. Chun. As in Captain Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the Retribution. The captain's daughter was here, in this nightmare place, being used as a test subject by alien monsters. Emma, your daddy sent me to get you. All of you. We're going to get you out of here right now. The other children began to move closer, hope flickering in their eyes for the first time in months. Morrison activated her communication system. Colonel Jackson, Bravo team has located 6 children in detention cell 7. They're mobile and responsive. Request immediate medical evaluation. Roger, Bravo team. Dr. Kim is en route to your position. What's their condition? Morrison looked at the children again, noting the evidence of medical procedures, the fear in their eyes, the way they instinctively stayed close together for protection. They've been through hell, sir, but they're fighters. These kids haven't given up. While Morrison's team secured the children, Colonel Jackson was facing a different kind of horror 3 levels deeper in the facility. His assault team had breached the main research laboratory, and what they found there made seasoned combat veterans stop and stare in disbelief. The laboratory was filled with monitoring equipment focused on dozens of transparent tubes, each one containing a human brain suspended in alien fluid. Data streams flowed across holographic displays, showing neural activity patterns and behavioral modification protocols. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Torres, Jackson's communications officer. They're not just experimenting on the children. They're mapping their minds. Jackson moved deeper into the laboratory, his weapon ready but forgotten as he absorbed the scope of the Zephyrian operation. This wasn't a simple kidnapping ring. This was a systematic attempt to understand and, ultimately, control human consciousness. Colonel, Dr. Kim's voice crackled through the communication system, I'm with the children from detention cell 7. They've been subjected to experimental psychoactive drugs, but the effects appear to be reversible with proper treatment. How many more are there? Jackson consulted his tactical display. We've identified 14 separate detention areas. Estimated 180 children still to evacuate. Understood. I'll need to set up a proper medical station. Some of these kids are going to need immediate trauma counseling. As Jackson's team moved through the facility, they began to understand the full scale of what the Zephyrians had been attempting. The children weren't just prisoners, they were research subjects in an effort to create a hybrid human-Zephyrian intelligence. The aliens had been trying to combine human creativity and emotional resilience with their own advanced logical processing. But they had made a fundamental error in their calculations. They had assumed that human children, removed from their families and cultures, would be easy to reshape. They had believed that young minds would be malleable enough to accept alien thought patterns and value systems. What they hadn't counted on was the simple, stubborn human refusal to surrender. In detention cell after detention cell, Jackson's Marines found children who had maintained their humanity despite months of psychological conditioning. They had formed protective bonds with each other, shared stories about their families, and kept alive the hope that someone would come for them. The Zephyrians had tried to erase human identity and replace it with something more controllable. Instead, they had created a generation of human children who understood exactly what they were fighting against. As Morrison helped Emma Chan and her cellmates climb through the ventilation shaft toward freedom, she heard the girl whisper to one of the younger children. I told you someone would come. I told you humans don't abandon each other. Morrison smiled grimly. The Zephyrians had learned about human adaptability, creativity, and emotional depth through their experiments. But they were about to learn about human fury, determination, and the lengths that humanity would go to protect its young. The real education was just beginning. Above them, Captain Chen watched through the Retribution's tactical display as her Marines systematically dismantled the facility's defenses. The Zephyrians had superior technology and defensive advantages, but they were fighting humans who had a very simple motivation: get the children out alive. Captain, her communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld. Its coordinator Veltar, the cultural liaison working with Ambassador Wilson. Chen's expression hardened. Put them through. The main screen filled with the image of a tall Zephyrian, its translucent skin shimmering with agitation. When it spoke, its voice carried the musical quality that had seemed so charming during the initial diplomatic contacts. Captain Chen, I must protest this unprovoked attack on our research facility. You are committing an act of war against the Zephyrian Collective. Shen's voice was ice cold when she replied. Coordinator Veltar, you have 200 human children in your laboratory. Children you kidnapped while pretending to negotiate peace with our government. The alien's posture shifted slightly, and Shen caught a flicker of something that might have been concern. The young humans are participating in a valuable cultural exchange program. Their families were compensated appropriately. Their families reported them as missing persons. They have no idea where their children are. Veltar's image seemed to shimmer with uncertainty. Captain, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we should discuss this through proper diplomatic channels. Coordinator, Chen interrupted, there are no diplomatic channels for what you've done. You imprisoned human children and subjected them to psychological experimentation. In human culture, that makes you an enemy worthy only of destruction. The alien's translator seemed to struggle with Chen's words, but the meaning came through clearly enough. Captain, surely you understand that the greater good requires certain sacrifices. The knowledge we have gained will benefit both our species. Chen leaned forward in her command chair. Coordinator, let me explain something about human nature that your research apparently missed. When you threaten human children, you don't just make enemies, you create something much more dangerous. You create humans who have nothing left to lose. The transmission ended abruptly, but Chen wasn't finished talking. She opened a channel to all human ships in the battle group. This is Captain Chen to all vessels. We have confirmation that our children are alive and we are bringing them home. Any alien force that interferes with that mission will be destroyed. No exceptions. 6 hours after the assault began, the last Zephyrian defender surrendered. Sergeant Kelly Morrison stood in the facility's main laboratory, watching as her fellow Marines carefully destroyed the alien equipment that had been used to torture human children. The transparent tubes that had contained extracted neural tissue were already broken, their contents properly disposed of according to Dr. Kim's strict protocols. Morrison held Emma Chen's small hand as the girl stared at the wreckage of the laboratory where she had spent the last 8 months. The captain's daughter hadn't said much since the rescue, but her grip on Morrison's hand was steady and strong. Are they all gone? Emma asked quietly. The bad aliens? Yes, sweetheart. They can't hurt you anymore. No, Emma said, her voice carrying a maturity that no 10-year-old should possess. I mean, are we going to make sure they can never hurt any children ever again? Morrison looked down at the girl, seeing something in her eyes that made her think of battle-hardened veterans. The Zephyrians had tried to break these children, but instead they had forged them into something harder and more determined than they had been before. That's not for me to decide, Emma. That's for people much smarter than me. Emma squeezed Morrison's hand. My daddy is very smart. And she's very angry. I think the bad aliens are going to learn something they don't want to know. Morrison couldn't argue with that assessment. On the bridge of the UES Retribution, Captain Chen was indeed making decisions that would reshape humanity's relationship with the galaxy. She had spent the last hour in communication with Earth Command, explaining the situation and transmitting evidence of Zephyrian crimes against humanity. The response had been immediate and unified, complete severance of diplomatic relations, immediate recall of Ambassador Wilson, and authorization for Chen to take whatever action she deemed necessary to prevent further atrocities. Captain, her intelligence officer reported, we've completed analysis of the facility's data systems. The Zephyrians have been conducting similar operations on at least 6 other worlds. We're looking at approximately 800 human children total. Chen felt her jaw tighten. 800 children. Across 6 worlds. The scope of the Zephyrian operation was staggering. Locations? 4 facilities in Zephyrian space, 2 on neutral worlds. All are heavily defended, but none are expecting military action. Chen considered her options. Her battle group was powerful, but it wasn't large enough to assault 6 heavily defended facilities simultaneously. However, she wasn't alone anymore. Open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha authorization. Admiral Catherine Hayes appeared on the main screen, her expression grim. Captain Chen, I've reviewed your reports. The President has authorized Operation Bright Angel, full military response to secure all human children held by Zephyrian forces. What are my orders, Admiral? You are hereby promoted to Commodore and given command of Task Force Guardian. The Second Fleet is en route to your position and should arrive within 72 hours. Your mission is simple: bring our children home, regardless of cost. Chen felt a surge of satisfaction. Understood, Admiral. What about the diplomatic situation? Hay's expression hardened. Coordinator Veltar contacted us directly an hour ago. They're claiming the children were willing participants in cultural exchange programs and demanding our immediate withdrawal. And our response? The President's response was very clear. Any species that harms human children will face the full military might of the United Earth Alliance. No negotiations, no compromises, no mercy. As the communication ended, Chen turned to address her bridge crew. These people had followed her into battle based on her word alone, trusting her judgment when the stakes couldn't have been higher. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just received confirmation that our actions here were not only justified but necessary. The Zephyrians have been conducting systematic kidnapping and experimentation operations against human children across multiple star systems. In 72 hours, we're going to be part of the largest rescue operation in human history. The bridge erupted in quiet satisfaction. These were professional military officers, and they understood the implications of what they were hearing. This wasn't just about rescuing children anymore, this was about establishing humanity's place in a galaxy that had proven to contain monsters. Meanwhile, in the facility's medical bay, Dr. Sarah Kim was documenting the full extent of Zephyrian crimes against the children. Each child she examined revealed new evidence of systematic psychological manipulation and experimental medical procedures. But what struck her most was the children's resilience. Despite months of captivity and abuse, they had maintained their essential humanity. They had protected each other, shared stories about their families, and never stopped believing that someone would come for them. Doctor, one of the older children, a 14-year-old named Marcus from the Proxima Centauri mining colony, approached her examination station. The aliens kept asking us about human emotions. They couldn't understand why we cried for our families. What did you tell them? Marcus met her eyes steadily. I told them they would never understand humans because they had never been children. They had never been loved unconditionally, never felt safe enough to be vulnerable, never learned to trust completely. They thought love was a weakness they could exploit. Dr. Kim felt tears prick her eyes. This boy had endured months of psychological torture, but he had emerged with a clearer understanding of human nature than most adults possessed. They were wrong, weren't they? She asked gently. Marcus nodded. Love isn't what makes us weak. Love is what makes us dangerous. 3 days later, Commodore Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution, watching as the assembled Second Fleet prepared for departure. 47 ships of various classes, carrying 30,000 Marines and enough firepower to level planets, all focused on a single mission: rescue human children and punish those who had harmed them. Commodore, her communications officer reported, were receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian Collective. It's marked as urgent diplomatic priority. Put it through to my ready room. 5 minutes later, Chen found herself face to face with what appeared to be the entire Zephyrian Leadership Council. Their translator devices rendered their musical language into flat, desperate human words. Commodore Chen, the lead Zephyrian, began, "We must discuss the current crisis. Perhaps we have misunderstood each other's intentions." Chen's voice was arctic cold. There has been no misunderstanding. You kidnapped and tortured human children. In response, we are coming to take them back. The young humans were participants in a research program designed to benefit both species. Surely you understand that scientific advancement sometimes requires difficult choices. Chen leaned forward. Let me make something clear. Every child you took was someone's son or daughter. Every experiment you conducted was an act of war against humanity. And every facility where you held our children will be turned into radioactive ash. The Zephyrians seemed to confer among themselves before responding. Commodore, we are prepared to return the remaining human young immediately. We will also provide compensation for any inconvenience our research program may have caused. Inconvenience? Chen's voice carried across the ready room with deadly quiet. You think torturing children is an inconvenience? We did not realize that humans would respond so aggressively to our research protocols. Perhaps we underestimated the emotional bonds between adult humans and their offspring. Chen stood up slowly. You underestimated everything about humanity. You thought we were a weak species because we show love to our children. You thought our emotions made us easy to manipulate and control. You thought you could steal our young and we would accept diplomatic explanations and technological bribes. The Zephyrians remained silent. What you fail to understand, Chen continued, is that everything you saw as weakness is actually our greatest strength. We love our children so much that we will cross the galaxy to save them. We form emotional bonds so strong that we will fight impossible odds to protect each other. And we have so much empathy that when we see children suffering, we become capable of absolutely anything. Commodore, surely we can reach a reasonable compromise. The compromise is simple, Chen interrupted. Return every human child immediately. Surrender the individuals responsible for the research program. And never come within 10 light-years of human space again. And if we refuse? Chen's smile contained no warmth whatsoever. Then, you'll discover why humans have never lost a war when we're fighting to protect our families. The transmission ended, and Chen returned to the bridge where her fleet waited for orders. Around her, the most powerful military force humanity had ever assembled, prepared to demonstrate what happened when a species made the mistake of threatening human children. Captain Torres, her former tactical officer who had been promoted to command the UES Defiance, opened a channel from his ship. Commodore, all vessels report ready for departure. Chen looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, human children were waiting for rescue. Children who had maintained their humanity despite everything the Zephyrians had done to them. Children who had never stopped believing that someone would come. All ships, this is Commodore Chen. Today we go to bring our children home. Let the galaxy know that humanity protects its own, regardless of the cost. As the fleet engaged its faster-than-light drives and disappeared into the void, one message echoed across every human communication network in the galaxy: we are coming for our children. Nothing in the universe will stop us. The Zephyrians had wanted to understand human nature. They were about to get a very thorough education in exactly what they had awakened. And, somewhere in the depths of space, 800 human children who had never given up hope were about to learn that their faith had been justified. Humanity was coming home.